All right, so this is a Grizzly 660. It had a broken differential rear diff brackets for it. This is a 2006. I don't know if I said that already. And you can see down in there, it's kind of hard, but you can see, you know, kind of towards the front, the tube, the frame tube that goes across is just ate up with rust and things like that. There's just not enough meat in that frame to really hold this differential for the amount of pressure it goes under. The person before me tried to weld it. Now you can see his weld back here, and he put a, you know, bigger the glob, better the job. He did decent welds back here, but I imagine he could get into that a lot better, or she could get into that a lot better and do what they needed to do to weld it up. Now when I got it and I started running this rear diff with it jacked up, I saw that the differential would go back and forth. So what I did is I took a steel plate, and you can kind of see it. Unfortunately, I got to hold the light here and the camera at the same time. Let's see if I can edge this light. You can only hold the light up. You don't only go where you don't need it to go. But nonetheless, you can see kind of the plate that I did. If I can point to it here, get a pointer, something long. But you can see I did a plate going back there, and it kind of runs, get underneath this control arm, right there. You can see that plate right at the tip of that. I'm no longer connected to this crossbar there, and the reason is it's just ate up. So I took a metal piece went across, and I'll post a picture at the end. I did have to notch the metal piece out to accommodate this part of the rear diff, and then I just did some right angle brackets coming up, rounded them off so that it hit anything, drilled through them, and that way I'm remounting or recreating a mounting point for this rear differential towards the front of the engine. The back is okay, and then since then I've asked people about this, or they saw it, and they say, hey, Turner Cycle makes a bracket for this to correct that. Now, this bracket is not designed to fix the differential. Once the front bracket or the rear bracket's already been damaged, you have to fix that and weld it up. I did. I welded that whole new bracket into place. But this is a piece that goes through, and I've got a picture of that I'm going to show. And it goes in between the frame and one of the bolts here and gets bolted on. Now I'm not going to take that off because I had to loosen these brackets up here to get that whole differential to basically move counterclockwise just a little bit to be able to get that bracket into place. And once that bracket's into place, that bolt will come out and go through that bracket. And then these brackets, or this bracket, gets a U-bolt that goes up here, U-clamp that goes up here and attaches to the top of the frame. That will correct a lot of the issues with this rear differential and why it torques and all of that. This bike will undergo some pretty heavy loads because I'm clearing some land and doing some things like that on my property in Kentucky. Now, the other thing that I plan to do eventually, and I'll have to do a separate video because I don't have it, I'm going to take a Kurt car receiver, one that's got a tube. Now, they make tubes that are more of a triangle tube that will fit perfect on here. And what I'm really wanting is that center square. I'm going to take the tube and I'm going to cut it off probably about 1 inch to each side, drill through it, and attach it with U-bolts onto the back of this frame, right in between those two pieces there. When I do that, I will also weld a nut on the bottom of that square receiver so that I can drive a bolt up in here. So it will be attached to 4 points up here, right there, 1 point down here. That will give me one heck of an ability to haul some stuff and pull some stuff out. I'll have a lot of strength. When I do that, and here's a caveat and why I'm wanting to make my own version, is I will come off the back of that square tube here into the Kurt, and I'm going to come down with another bracket, hit this bolt and this bolt right here. It will be a triangle shaped bracket that gets welded up towards the front of the square here that gets attached to this frame that goes down and it's going to hit that. The biggest advantage is going to be is I will have 2 points that this thing attaches to the rear diff. The original brackets location, remember, new bracket here, and back there, I will have what I bought from Turner Cycles, and then I will have a triangle piece bracket that goes through here that attaches to these 2 bolts. That will keep my rear diff in place 100% without any movement at all, and won't get any movement to where it goes back and forth like this, and or any movement that goes back and forth like this. And the reason being is these diffs, they're $200 on eBay for a cheap version. I've seen them go as high as $400 to $500 for probably an OEM type version, and I'm just wanting to save this rear diff. You don't have to take all this stuff out. I was going to try to replace the seal in behind here. Unfortunately, everybody says, oh, you just pull that shaft a couple light taps and it comes right out. Yeah, they're full of crap. Mine is seized in there, and I'm pretty certain that I may damage this drive axle when I go to do that, to pull it out of there, and I don't want to do that because I'm getting ready to take this out on the property this weekend, and I want to ride this quad before I break it down, screwing up a good axle. So there it is. Just, you know, it was good that I took all those A-arms off, because you could really get in there and I could do a video on this. Any questions, feel free to ask. Again, Turner Cycles will give you that bracket. That is the version for the 660. The 700, you have to tell them, because it's a plate that goes back here on this, and that's kind of why how I got my idea, is it's a plate that attaches here, and then it has a point that comes down and attaches to 2 bolts right there. I don't know why they didn't do this one this way. The 660 was just one hole, but I would have preferred to have a bracket that came down and attached to 2 spots. But I'll overcome that on my own. So that is the 660 rear differential. When you break that piece, you can kind of see there the end of the bracket. It's a little dirty, but where it's welded onto this piece here. If you didn't want to weld, you're not good with welds, you could have put a U bolt in here, and that would have done the same thing. I just welded it up. Got a 110 MIG welder. If I had a 220 MIG welder, I would have got a lot cleaner welds on that with some gas, but didn't. So, but that is how you correct the rear diff movement and anything you may have on your Grizzly. All right, so I got the bracket in. Everything has been tidied back up. Got all the control arms back in place. Again, I did not mess with that rear seal because it's a slow leak, and it's not worth damaging that drive axle for the time being. Not before I'm getting ready to go on a trip. You can see that bracket all mounted up. Try to get the light angles at different points here so you can see. It just has a U-bolts. I will paint those. They don't take the first coat that well, but it's just to keep things from rusting. That is the bolt that goes in the rear diff and holds it into place. The way I did this was I loosened up the original brackets and you know, at the bottom front here, the bottom rear, and then I loosely tightened that bracket onto the bolt of the rear diff cover. I left the U-bolts completely loose. Then I went down and gave about 10 ugga-duggas on each bracket on the bottom, especially since they are straight through grade 8 bolts that I put in. So I knew I didn't have to worry about stripping them out, and especially in this bracket because it's solid as heck since I made it and fabricated it. Same with the back here, probably gave it 7.5 ugga-duggas since I'm going into the original brackets. However, again, this is going into a hard surface on that diff, so you can tighten it up and you can't over tighten it. The only problem you may have is you may pull those brackets together so much that you have to bend them out a little bit or pry the diff out if you have to get into work on it. Then I went in and did that bolt right there and tightened it, probably about 4 ugga-duggas on that, because you are going into aluminum into that rear diff. I think it's aluminum or cheap pot metal, don't know. So I tightened it up pretty tight, but you get to that point, you can screw up and go too far, and you know you have, and when you do, you're buying a rear diff because you can't use that point anymore. And then I went back and tightened up those U-clamps, U-bolts, whatever you want to call them, in unison, you know, tapped to each side to where they're kind of level. I did it to where I slightly crimped into the frame, just enough to make a dimple to where it doesn't slide back and forth, but I didn't tighten it enough that I crushed that frame. You don't want to do that. You can over tighten these U-bolts and crush that frame, and you'll screw yourself up later, so you don't want to do that. The other thing that I did that Turner Cycles didn't provide was they just put standard nuts on there. I went ahead and put 1/4-20 nylocks on there, so that way I don't have to worry about that coming loose on the trail. Because this is going to get a lot of movement back here, a lot of torque going back and forth, letting off the gas, giving it gas brakes, going forward, reverse, all of that, and I didn't want those to loosen up. So again, I just painted things just to keep things from rusting, tightened everything up, checked everything out, lubed up my points here while I was at it, lubed up all my joints where things are connecting, things I got since I had it apart to do so, and then just checked it out, make sure it spins freely and nothing's in place, so, or in the place, out of place, I'm sorry. So that's it. That's a Turner rear diff bracket to keep it from twisting counterclockwise as we're looking at it, and then from side to side as we're looking at it, depending on what angle relates to that. So any questions, hit me up, happy to answer. It's not a bad thing to do. I highly recommend doing it on all 660s, even if you don't have broken brackets in the bottom here, to prevent broken brackets. And all 700 Grizzlies out there is to get the plate, the right plate that goes on the back, the gusset, and goes on there. That will keep you from tearing up your rear diff. This is just an oversight on Yamaha. They should have put some kind of mounting bracket at the top of this rear diff instead of just relying on the bottom where that frame is going to rust out and cause those brackets to get weak and then eventually give up the ghost. So, all right, so here is the finished hitch. As you can see, I added a brace of my own. Paint is still drying, so very glossy. But you can see I've got the Turner Cycles bracket up there, which is good. It mounts and it's a solid bracket. I went ahead and put one down below. I changed my mind a little bit. I was going to use a regular car hitch to put on the back of this, but it'd be pretty big and I didn't want that bulk on there after I realized I already had the metal to fabricate this. Now, the new bracket I created is basically a steel, a hard steel L bracket, and it went onto that rear diff. Now I had to cut out the back here to, or the flat piece. You can see the flat coming, get the light through here, coming down through there. And then I had to cut it out, notch it out to get around that bar, the frame, and then put it on with a U-bolt. That is just, it's precautionary. Again, I don't want this diff to screw up and me have to pay a couple $100 to get it repaired. But that is the hitch assembly. That little piece right here, the center piece, that's about 12 bucks, I think, from Harbor Freight. The problem is it has just one bolt to hold it in place. And when you back up, that thing swings to the left and right, and that was my problem with the hitch. So what I did is just put some L brackets on there with some U-bolts around the hook, whatever you want to call it, the little hook ring they had there, and then to the frame. So that helps strengthen it up because there's a lot of downforce on this when you put a trailer on. These brackets will help hold that and secure it. You can see it from the top there, what I did. And it's all removable. I didn't do anything permanent to the bike that I can't take apart and change and or take off to service. So that is the hitch assembly that I came up with for my 660 Grizzly 2006, and the extra bracket I created to help hold that diff into place to keep from twisting, since it'll be doing a lot of work for me.